Welcome out there, everybody. Welcome to the show of Inside the GM Studio, a podcast all about the tabletop RPG hobby. I'm your host, Matt.
Excuse me, I'm David.
this disgusting degenerate over here.
Hey, I might be disgusting and a degenerate. Oh, that was like the whole thing, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, totally agreed.
So this week, no games were had by either of us. But I had some folks reach out. Number one, Rebecca emailed in because someone that she told about the podcast asked her that what they're saying is we talk a lot about other games, but we talk about D&D a lot.
Yes.
What is it about other games are good other than D&D? And that's when I
wait. Back up. What other games are good other than D&D?
What makes other games good that aren't D&D?
Oh, okay.
That's what I wanted to get at here, and I'm trying to pull this up. And I had this. I had just recently listened to another a YouTube video that said, "Hey, if you ever want to know about the cultures of play." You should read this blog that the Retired Adventurer did called 6 Cultures of Play. I have taken that and wrote down some notes into what the future of the show is going to be for a little while. I'm trying to come out with a whole nice little schedule for us to do that I can send to David and be like, this is what I want to talk about. And I'll have some little bullet points for us so that we'll be all nice and ready for it. But this one here is just to talk about what are the cultures of play? What can you expect at your table? And maybe some of the games that I can help throw out there that I have known about, maybe have played in or just read about, and see if we can help out a little bit here. So when it comes to actual cultures of role-playing games, each table has its own culture, really. Not just the game system that you're using. Of course, some tables are going to want more story-driven stuff. Sometimes the table's going to want more combat stuff. That is the culture of your table. A lot of times, these games that you can find will help build on to that. They will help. They will use the mechanics of the game to fulfill what you want, the culture of your game group, and that's what we're here for. Starting off with the first culture, which is classic, also the oldest. So classic games were like Chainmail, Dungeons and Dragons, the white box, the original, the one that came right after Chainmail. With classic was all about combat and interactions, and that's it. That's all they were. There was no real story. Hell, a lot of times dudes would start the adventure, they'd go into a dungeon, one of the PCs would die, and then after that combat was over, he was back just because they don't give a fuck. They just want to go clear the dungeon, get some loot, play the game, go home. No story, nothing. A lot of people ask, why would you like this? Well, do you like it when the GM runs the monsters as written? Are you playing this class that has been stripped down to the bare bones? There's not really much else to do with it. There was no real inventory management. There was just a couple dice. You had a D20 and some D6s. And that was it. And that's all it was. Classic was just a guy ran you through a dungeon. You fought monsters, got some loot for next time, and that was it. I don't even think the levels, it went through like level 1 to 10, I think was it.
I would say that there's also a couple other big benefits to that style of game, or basically just kind of, maybe this is one of your other cultures, but like kind of somewhat tied to the notion of like an OSR, or basically an old school role playing game, not old school Renaissance, but like the actual old school role playing games. But the OSR movement is kind of tried to encapsulate this, which is, and we've talked about this on the show before, but what it does is when you just throw somebody into a scenario, you don't give them a story or you give them a plot, and everything is pared back and is heavy, conflict driven, let's say. There's no emotional stakes. It's like literally a life or death situation. Like every encounter, some deadly trap or some horrible monster or some weird thing that you have to figure out. What it does is one, it allows the players to pursue things in the way in which they want, which is very valuable. And two, it challenges the players, so it rewards lots of like creativity. You're not leaning on your stats, you're not leaning on the story or what like an NPC says or does. There's no nuance to it. It's just all you. It's pure. It's
Yep.
very I would suspect that there is a strong correlation between people that like that style of game and politically identify as libertarians.
Yeah,
Because
I could see that. Yeah.
it's a very libertarian style
Yeah.
game, and
Yep.
they also tend to be kind of harsh about it, which libertarians
Yeah.
can be kind of harsh. They're like, well, if you need some story, you need to have your fucking hand held through shit by some paternal figure, then like then you're just a wuss and you suck and you don't know how to play role playing games and you just want to go like, you voted for Ron Paul, didn't you? How'd you know that? And you're like, because I get the vibe. But there is a lot of value in that, and I think it does. You have to have players that are really dialed into those elements. For fledgling players and people that are a little soft and squishier in recent generations, it might be a bridge too far.
Yeah, classic players, there's not a lot out there anymore. If you do find a classic player, they're probably in their early 60s, all the way to like their early 70s now. These are the guys that played Chainmail and they bought the white box back in 1970, and
Yeah.
that was it.
And it's even distinct from those things are even distinct from an OSR because they're not role playing games,
No,
not
uh-uh.
really.
Nope.
They were like, you got to understand that when these games were doing, there's no like Legend of Zelda and shit. So it was basically just trying to capture the experience that those old original dungeon crawler games like that. Like it's like playing a roguelike, right? And there's no story. You're just
Yeah.
like in a dungeon. There are things that are trying to kill you, and you have to figure it out. What can I do? It's like, I don't know, try clicking on the wall. Like, okay, I clicked on the wall. Like, oh, it does something. You're like, how the fuck did you figure that out? It's like, just a lot of trial and error.
So this is a cool little bit of information for all of you out here because I found out about this when I was making up our schedule coming up. So I was coming up with a show all about hit points and just health in general for games. Do you know where hit points came from?
I don't actually.
So, back in war game days, these guys, after it was World War II. Yes, it was after World War II. Right after World War II, all the soldiers came back, and a lot of them weren't deployed at the time, and they had all this knowledge in their head, and they thought, "Hey, this is the end of the war. There's not going to be another great war like this ever again." Just like in World War I when that ended, they were like, "That was the Great War. It'll never happen again." They're like, what do we do with all this knowledge that we have? And so they started making war games. Now we know that it is Warhammer and things like that. A big table, a bunch of minis, you roll some dice, and you guys fight it out over a battlefield. When they came up with hit points for each character, or battalion even, yeah, minis. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But yeah, for those that can't see what I'm doing,
Listeners
here,
can't see you doing that,
yeah,
Matt. So
I'm holding up my fingers like like I'm holding a mini. But what it was, and this is fucking ridiculous. So one hit point was, your hit points were how many times you could get blown up by a tank before you were destroyed. That's why humans, for the longest time, just had one hit point.
yeah,
You could take a hit from a tank once, and that was it.
yeah.
But there were other tanks that could take a few hits, and that's how they were just like, what your hit points were. How many times you could be assaulted by a tank before becoming destroyed was the whole thing. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. That's especially because it's probably more akin to what we would call like a mod damage and
Yeah.
rifts or something, right? Like your
Yeah,
mod
yeah.
damage is like your glitter boy has like 8 mod damage or whatever, but then
Yeah,
like
what do they call that shit? Mega damage.
mega damage, yeah. But yeah, that's interesting.
The next one that came after Classic, which a lot of us know these days, was the trad games or traditional games.
Hmm.
This is when this is the dawn of the story module. This
Hmm.
is, this is your Ravenloft. This is your Keep on the Shadowfell. This is all those great stories that
Not
all
keep on
these
the Shadowfell, keep on the Borderlands, bro.
Keep on the Borderlands, Keep on the Shadowfell was fourth edition. My bad.
Yes.
These are all the old modules that we know and love, and we still use them to this day when they remake them for fifth edition. And every now and then we just go and grab some and try to make it over again ourselves. This is where story first came in.
Hmm.
The story is doing its own things. The mechanics are used to help progress that story, or at least make the characters survive to see the end of the story. But the GM still has total control over that narrative. At this time, when traditional games come out, this is like second edition, AD&D, Pathfinder, even somewhat of fifth edition today is still a traditional game.
Yeah, it's a game that first introduced the concept that there was a narrative,
Yes.
and also was the first kind of games that had a theme to them, where it was like you were contending with probably not as strong as some later iterations of role playing games, but yeah, that's like it wasn't just you're in the middle of a jungle, what do you do? It was like probably the biggest game changer for it was the concept of the adventure hook, right? Like what drew you into a plot of something that was happening in the world that might require your involvement as an adventurer, uh, as opposed to just kind of you're in the world and you're an adventurer, do some adventuring, right?
One of the big differences that traditional games from then compared to traditional games that are now is that back in the 80s and early 90s, we're talking, like I was saying, AD&D, second edition AD&D, Pathfinder, third edition, is that they focused more on the mechanics, focused more on combat
Yes.
than they did for anything else, though social or real, um, uh, 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 help me out here, not travel mechanics, but exploration. There we go.
Exploration, yeah.
There are no real exploration or social mechanics, and they are mostly just combat, which is still a lot in our traditional games, where traditional games are what kind of overrun the hobby right now. It's what a lot of people go for.
Yeah, but a key to them too was also that like you hit the nail on the head. There was a story insofar as there was a conflict, but the role in role playing game here started to become prevalent, right? And so,
Yes.
but what it was is it was like you're a big strong fighter, and you protect your allies, or you're a rogue and you're sneaky and you pick locks and you open treasure chests, or you disarm traps and shit. That was your role. There was no like, I had a traumatic childhood and then, I really have a
Yep.
propensity toward like, elves romantically. It's like there was none of that, right? It was just your role was like largely archetypical. It was
Yep.
just like you're maybe if you're a dwarf, like when you're in the tavern or whatever, you grumble and you want to get some ale, but there was no thought into like character development. You just
Yeah.
assimilated
Not
into
really.
some sort
No.
of tropey stereotype, and because that was fun, and because the game really didn't explore more character driven themes, then it was enough because you just kind of wanted to be the guy that was swatting goblins away with a battle axe or launching spells from the back of the party, and that was enough nuance for you to care.
Exactly. Next one up after Trad. So retired adventurer put it in as Nordic LARP.
Mm.
I was just expecting it to be LARP, but he went into it very well of what Nordic LARP is, and I believe it's mostly because of there is a game convention that happens in Norway in an actual Viking boathouse, and they just go in there, they light torches, and they play role playing games. It's a whole role playing game convention in a Viking boathouse from Viking times. It's badass. Nordic LARP is all about immersion. These games, they rely on immersion. We're talking Dread, 10 Candles, games like those where you really have to feel what's happening. With Dread, you're watching that Jenga tower become, more skeletal and starting to wobble more. You're actually getting the feeling of being scared as this game is going on. 10 candles. As you're blowing out the candles, it's getting darker, watching the darkness enclose on you. It's all about that immersion.
Yeah.
LARP itself can be very immersive. It's supposed to be, as you're usually dressing up, hanging out in the woods, and hitting each other with foam swords. So it's all about that immersion.
It's this is the genre of gaming that kind of flipped the I guess what he's calling classic model on its head. Um, it suddenly became very little about the mechanics. You just kind of had mechanics there to bolster the atmosphere,
Yep.
and it was very much about the characters. It was very much about their interpersonal dramas. Often they're immersive, and they might have a thin plot, but mostly that plot is kind of there to explore the characters' motivations and interests, and presumably weave some sort of atmosphere, either one of horror or one of Viking times or whatever it is, and then you just kind of you have a mechanic in there that allows you to do that. Like the VTM version. What do they call it? Not theater of the mind, but it's something of the mind. Mind's
Mind's
Eye
Eye
Theater.
Theater.
Mind's Eye Theater. You did that for a while, like in
Yeah.
your 20s, didn't you? Yeah. And so it's really just like you're having dialogue and there's some sort of plot and you're kind of exploring things, and I believe you have some crude mechanic and maybe even character sheets, but for the most part it's all about, dressing up in the clothes and kind of like
Yep.
steeping yourself in the atmosphere and the character motivation. This is the sort of style that is for like theater people,
Yes,
which I
it's
imagine is why you
exactly
did it.
what it is. Yep.
Was because you just knew all these theater chuckleheads and they were really into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the style of gaming that if you do the LARP version, people are most likely to make fun of you, and
Yeah.
tease you because you go to Ren fairs and you go out in the park dressed up like a vampire or whatever. And so,
Yeah.
but Matt's right. It is absolutely just more about immersion than it is crunch.
Yeah. The Nordic LARP with the immersive way of play brought in a lot of them say that it was this that created the story games. The games that we know of, we call hippie games or feel good games, narrative games. These are your fates, your powered by the apocalypse, anything that is narrative driven, which even 10 Candles can still be. And I even put a note in here that in 10 Candles, the better the players roll, the more control they have over the narrative. That's the whole thing about story games, is that it's all about player agency and them controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
The GM is more of a, like in Powered by the Apocalypse, they're called the MC. They're just a master of ceremonies. You're more of like, not even so much of a referee as you're just kind of a director.
A facilitator.
A facilitator. That's a much better word. The story games themselves is the main mechanic changes up the narrative, and the GM takes the role of the master of ceremonies, making sure that the players' autonomy stays the number one focus, and that it is now the GM's role to be that one that when the players want it to their end role, because when you're rolling dice in a story game, it goes from a failure to you get what you want, but something bad happens. You kind of get what you want, and then you get what you want. And the players can actually choose which one of these outcomes they want.
Yeah, it's much more like an improv troupe, right?
It is, yeah.
You say yes to things, and this is the reason that people that are in the classic genre often don't like that, because
Yep.
they like the GM to be the arbiter of like what happens, like who's raising the stakes here, like
Yeah.
I'm in charge, and I've always found it kind of weird too that like I kind of alluded earlier to like the more libertarian vibe among people that like OSRs, but I've also really noticed maybe they gravitate toward that because the GMs that run games like that are the most power drunk assholes that you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
Like they're so like just I run the world and like I need to be in control, and giving the players control of what happens is fucking nonsense, and you're just like,
Right.
man, I see why you're so skeptical of government, because apparently when you're put in a position of power, you're just like totally like authoritarian. It's like, okay, I get it.
With story games, their mechanics in the actual game itself is to do just that. It is to take the narrative and change it up in a certain way
Mm-hmm.
that the players decide on. It is no longer the GM's idea to, it is not their role to force the narrative. It is the players. They are the
Yeah,
ones that are going to change it.
it just introduces a little bit of randomness into varying degrees, but the role of the randomness is not to govern what happens, but it's kind of temper what happens, and that's the big benefit of it, is that it's like, look, what you want to happen in an exploration of a particular idea, it's just kind of a safeguard to just going like, okay, there's got to be some guardrails on this. You can't just take the plot in any direction you want. But the biggest downside of games like this and scenarios like this is they usually lack a cohesion. Like they only work with players that are motivated to kind of delve into their own storylines, their own characters. It's really, really great for like characters that have inner demons or dark histories and stuff like that. That's why it's suitable to games like VTM and more horror themed games. But what it lacks is an external thing that raises the stakes and pushes the plot forward. Because the whole idea is to kind of live and meander in this character driven thing. And I think people that don't like it, the downside, the criticism of it is that that seems kind of angsty and masturbatory. Like, give me external stakes and a plot that drives things forward. But players that like that sort of things, and they tend to gravitate toward things of a certain stripe, that it's really, really good at that. It's like that thing that turned all the way up. So.
The narrative game boom that happened here, especially with Fate and then the Powered by the Apocalypse systems, brought about the OSR. The OSR, which is the old school Renaissance, the old school revival, the old school, your third or fourth R word that you want to put in there that could go along with it. I want to read this out, what the retired adventurer put in his blog here. The OSR draws on the challenge-based gameplay from the proto-culture of D&D and combines it with an interest in PC agency, particularly in the form of decision-making. The goal is a game where PC decision-making, especially, I'm sorry, David, you might have to help me with this one, diegetic, Diegetic,
Diegetic, yeah.
diegetic decision-making is the driver of play. The OSR is when a lot of people were going towards the narrative systems, they said, fuck this. We want a GM that's going to tell us where we're going, but we don't want a lot of the rules of traditional games. We like classic, but we want a little bit more player agency.
Got you. Yeah, that's
The OSR community now.
for those that care. Diegetic is, it means the delineation of like artistic elements that are probably that the people in a particular world perceive as part of the narrative work. So it's a pretentious word, but it's something that takes place. So like for instance, something that takes place with, it's almost like a meta commentary. So like in movies, for instance, diegetic noise is happens as part of the action. And so the characters in the film can hear it, right? Like if you're watching a movie and they're at a rock show and you hear the music and they hear the music, the characters in the narrative hear that. That's diegetic noise. But when you're watching like a transition scene and there's like something from the score overlaying it, this artifice from outside, something that the director or the producer put in there, that is not diegetic. So it means of or relating to the artistic elements within that world, as perceived by the characters.
Hey, all
So
right.
anyway,
Thank you.
just a
Yeah,
linguistic
he's a
lesson
writer,
there.
ladies and gentlemen. He knows these things.
Don't use that word unless it's in the only time it's appropriate is within the context of film. You say diegetic noise is typically the only thing that matters, right? Like, but outside that context, don't use it.
Yeah, it's a good idea. OSR games have become very large largely like the OSR community, they really like taking OSR games and making them modular so that they can like kind of share them almost like Pokemon cards with other OSR players. It's weird to say, but it's the truth because what they do is they want that traditional play for player agency, but they like that classic mentality where it is still player versus GM and it is us against him. We have to beat what he's throwing at us.
It's
And they
it's
like to, yeah, they like to take other OSR game mechanics and then be able to implement it into their own games, trying to kind of fuck over the game master or vice versa.
it's well, the thing is though, is we don't get the OSR, whether it means Renaissance, Revival, Recognizance, or
Yeah,
whatever it means. Um, Reconnaissance. I don't know. I've heard like 10 different things for the R. But you don't get that without the hippie games that preceded it because
yep,
just like everything generational, like you think that whatever it is that your parents did is square, and they think that whatever their parents did is square. It's
yep,
the likelihood that you probably get along better with your grandparents than your parents because their parents pulled away from what they did and then you pulled away from what your parents did, which actually kind of inadvertently kind of pushed you a little bit toward the sensibilities of the generation before your parents. So OSRs were born out of enough is enough with no rules, enough is enough with all this like character backstory and motivation. So they took basically the elements that they liked from trad games, if that's what he's calling them, and
hmm,
blended them with what he's calling classic
classic,
games.
yep,
And so really it's almost strangely, um, I would argue that most of the OSR games now, although it's called old school Renaissance, it's actually a thing in its own right. It actually
hmm,
isn't what games used to be
no,
like back then.
no,
Not
not
really.
really. Uh-uh.
Um, but it's trying to capture the spirit and the chutzpah
Yep,
of the chainmail era, but then be like, okay, we do want some plot and we do want like some like narrative and character stuff, but mostly the emphasis should be on um, these crunchier elements, especially because OSRs tend to be more crunchy than
hmm,
they are rules light, where like really in the kind of what he's calling the classic era, the rules were a little more pared back actually
yeah, they were.
than
They were more
OSRs
of
are.
just, yeah, you get six attributes. You have your dice that say what your weapons do, and if you're a rogue, you roll a d6 on, and 2 out of 6 you perform your skill. It was
Yeah,
just
it's
like,
actually those old games. Strangely, if you remember this, there was so in recent years there's been the kind of Castle Ravenloft, Last Wrath of Ar-Shadowlan, and whatever. But prior to that, there was a whole series of board games that came out in the early '90s. I had the one called Dragon Strike. I think maybe you played it too.
hmm,
Um, those are closer to what like the chainmail era was. Like those, they were designed to be kind of trad game light, but they really are more like they're really pared back. It's like, oh, you're a fighter. You get a D8 to attack instead of a D6 or a D4 or
yep,
whatever, right? And it's like so that it was simplified and not particularly crunchy. The crunchiness came in the late trad game
yeah,
era, and then people that were really big OSR fans kind of rolled that element in with the other elements from what he's calling the classic era.
yep,
So, although it says it's a renaissance, it really is not a return to form. It's like creating its own thing
yeah,
that makes it feel like it's nostalgic, but really isn't.
yeah. 9 out of 10 OSRs, if they are, if they're trying to copy D&D, they threw out THACO and they
Hmm.
just use the same AC, defense system that we use for fifth edition pretty much these days.
Hmm.
Because they don't want to have to deal with THACO. A lot of OSR players, they don't want to have to deal with a lot of math, even though they say that they do.
Yeah.
Other OSR games out there, if you're ever looking for them, I highly suggest Shadow Dark. I think Shadow Dark is the best OSR game out on the market right now. Right next to that one, in very close second, would be Old School Essentials. I really like Old School Essentials. And then right after that is Dungeon Crawl Classics. Those are the three I would say.
Yeah, Dungeon
Look
Crawl
at those
Classics
ones.
is pretty good. So, you never really gave me a review of what you thought of the Hyperborea, because that seems like an OSR.
So
It's billing itself as a sword and sorcery rules light, but it's an OSR.
it's a it is an OSR. It's almost like an AD&D just complete rip, because it has multiple rules that you can use. If you want to use THAC0, you can, but if you don't want to, use this instead. And they're that is like, oh, Hyperborea does this really well. How I was talking about how OSRs are modular, just like that. They're like, you want to use THAC0? This is what you do to use THAC0. You don't, this is what you do if you don't. They have a lot of rules for that, a lot of mechanics that are easily able to be taken out and replaced with something else in order to make it what you want.
Yeah, those style games that are modular, the big benefit is that it is piecemeal and interchangeable, and that you can pretty much run any style of story with whatever mechanics kind of suit your style of play. That benefit is, and again, it has the same benefits that the classic era does with the player autonomy and whatever, and high levels of challenge. It just gives it a little more structure, but really allows mechanical versatility, I would say.
Yep.
So,
Oh yeah, and I forgot I wrote down here that loot is king in OSRs, because one of their big things that they really love, they love XP. They love XP. They will never get rid of XP, and killing monsters and hoarding gold is XP. So that's your OSR. This last one I kind of broke up into two. There are two versions of this, just because I kind of saw a few different versions in here. The Retired Adventurer brought up Neotrad. What OSR did to classic, Neotrad does to traditional. Neo meaning the one, and trad meaning traditional. These are a little bit more collaborative and tactical. A lot of games these days are leaning towards Neotrad. The GM and the PCs work together to change up the narrative. Not exactly sway, but change it up a little bit. Whenever you see a meta currency these days, this is a little more Neotrad, because the players have a mechanic that they can throw out there, and many a times this meta currency you can change up the narrative a little bit. You can change what's happening in the scene. You can bring somebody back to life real easily, something like that. And when I mean collaborative, like Fabula Ultima and Daggerheart are great examples of these, because like in Fabula Ultima, whenever an enemy shows up in a scene, the players get a Fabula point, some meta currency that they can use. And then when the players use a Fabula point, the GM gets an Ultima point, which he can then use against them. Daggerheart does this with Hope and Fear. The players amass hope to use their powers, while the GM gets fear to use
the
against
Fantasy
them.
Flight Star Wars game does some light side, dark side points.
Yep,
Yeah.
light side, dark side points. And it's the exact same way that they use it. Like if the GM in Daggerheart or in Star Wars wants to do something, I don't want to say completely fuck over the players, but throw in a wrench. You know, they have a mechanic now, something that is physical that says, I can do this.
Yeah,
and throw it in there.
It's a way of acknowledging that inherently the players and the GM are on opposite sides of the conflict, but it's a way of acknowledging that they are part of the same storytelling effort,
Yes.
and kind of eliminates that adversarial relationship, but doesn't eliminate it to the point where like the GM's in your corner and wants you to succeed, right?
And it also doesn't make him a cuck in the corner like story games do.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, he's still running the game, but the players have just as much power to change up the narrative a little bit that he does sometimes.
Yeah, so there's more of a push pull instead of a
Yes,
GM
exactly.
GM going after you and you trying to scrape by to survive kind of situation. It's
Perfect way
more
of saying it.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, Retired Adventurer talked about when it comes to neo-traditional that it's usually collaborative and tactical. I see more collaborative games in neo-trad games these days instead of tactical, where tactical is like, you know, did you like D&D 4th edition? Do you only want to play 4th edition and games like that? Those are your tactical games. That is Draw Steel, like MCDM just came out with. There are plenty of other role playing games that I would have to think of because I'm not a big fan of mass tactics when it comes to role playing games. When it comes to the tactical role playing games with neo traditional games specifically, is that there is a move for everything that you
Hmm.
do, but each of these moves that you have has a bit of flavor to it, and it will
Yeah,
write it out for you so you know what this
that
move looks like, what it does, and how it affects the environment.
to be fair, I think that's what he's getting at when he's saying tactical. Like when you
Yeah,
say that D&D is a tactical role-playing game, right? Like you
fourth
have
edition.
quantify. Yeah, you have well, 5th edition is a tactical role-playing game still
It is,
too.
but it's not as
Um,
tactical like it was with fourth edition, I think.
right, right. But it just means like tactical and strategic are different.
Hmm.
And it's small scale skirmishes with things concrete and quantified, right? So, for instance, a general a general thinks strategically because they're thinking about the entire war, right? A unit commander thinks tactically, how do I win this battle? And those thought processes are very different. And so games that have mechanics for both often have to be very careful. It's the reason that D&D doesn't really have ship to ship battles
Hmm.
or like army because it's a tactical role-playing game and those are strategic endeavors and you would have to introduce strategic mechanics in order to make them work well. Some games do very well with this and other games not so much.
A couple that I could list off here, other than Dungeons and Dragons fourth edition, which is always the one that comes right to the forefront of my mind when I think of tactical role playing games. There's also 13th Age. 13th Age was the actual developers for fourth edition, the guys that wrote the rules for that. They went and
Mhm.
made their own game, kept the daily utility uh, encounter powers, that sort of format, which I think that is what really makes it the tactical flavor of it all. And then Lancer. Lancer is the big one. I want to be a fan of Lancer. I really do. When you are in your mech, there is a complete different set of rules than when you are outside of your mech, and that drives me crazy. But when you are in your mech, it is one of the most tactical, the most fun games you've ever play. But then you want to get social, and then you got to do. There's like a whole different character sheet and a
Well,
whole set of different set of rules you got to do.
I
It's
mean,
bullshit.
if my memory serves, I believe good examples of tactical role-playing games would all Shadowrun is typically handled
Yeah.
tactically and
Yep.
also
GURPS,
rifts.
riffs,
Yeah.
GURPS could be
Yep.
considered tactical.
Yeah, see, but the thing is the reason that I think we kind of might be inclined to omit some games is because most games that are tactical basically necessitate a grid.
Yeah.
They
Hmm.
necessitate a battle grid, and some get like you can get away in Shadowrun without having a battle grid.
Oh yeah.
You can, and
Hmm.
so it kind of makes you realize like it kind of causes you to forget that it's a tactical game, but it's not as strongly tactical. Um, what was the even to a lesser degree Titan's Grave? Although I think from what I can tell, it probably uses a little bit of theater of the mind too.
That's a little bit
Uh,
more, yeah, and that one is also a little bit more of a, I would say, a trad game. Just oh no, actually, I might bring that into Neo Trad because of the powerpoints.
yeah, I would say it's probably a hybrid of that, but it is a tactical game. It's probably a somewhere between Neo Trad. Yeah, it's probably pretty solidly in the Neo Trad cat if that's what he's going to call it. That's not what the phraseology I would have used, but go
Yeah,
on.
yeah, that would be either traditional Neo Trad just because of the extra, like with the dragon points or the dragon die and all that,
Oh
or
yeah,
whatever.
or even the Dragon Age Origins
Yeah.
RPG
Hmm.
would be in that category.
But that's it. That's my little list of cultures of play of this day. Uh, and that was, I tried to add a little bit more than what the retired adventurer talked about in his blog. If you want, I'm going to hold on to this. I will have the link to that in the show notes for this episode because it is a good read. And
Yep.
the retired adventurer, I'm going to go through a lot of his old writings and stuff because he seems to be pretty awesome. But that was it for this one. A nice little show for you today, and hopefully, kind of us going forward into what what we're going to be talking about in the near future, talking a little bit more about different games and what makes the games them. I'm going to do my best. I'm really going to try. But this one's going to be a little bit shorter because we didn't have any games to play, so we didn't really have anything else to talk about. We just talked about the cultures. Do you have anything that you want to end on there, Dave?
I can't I can't promise I'll try, but I'll try to try.
Yeah. I never promise to try, but I'm going to try to try.
I'm gonna try to try.
Yeah.
No, I got nothing else.
How about you out there? What is the culture at your table? Did any of these resonate with you? Do any of these really kind of just say what your table was and you didn't even know it? Let us know. Send it in. Right to insidethegmstudio@gmail.com and let us know. Tell us that we were fucking right on the money about this shit and that we're good. We know what we're talking about. That's why we're still doing this show. Or give us something else to talk about. What kind of cultures have you seen? Which ones did we miss? Let us know. Give us something to talk about because we like talking about shit. Obviously, we made a whole show about it. But for this week, for Inside the GM Studio, I have been your host, Matt.
And I'm David.
Oh.